All right. Hey, what's going on, Warrior? Jeff Anderson here, Executive Director of warlife.com and the War Life Academy. And welcome to this week's streaming podcast episode. And this one comes on the heels of our recent Tactical Taco Tuesday briefing that we just had last week, which, if you're not familiar with it, that is my opportunity to engage more with our all access members for our War Life Academy. We do stream it on our channels as well. It's the second Tuesday of every month. And it's an opportunity for me to make my favorite food, tacos, and we give a healthy spin to them. We try some really crazy ass recipes. And then we also do Q&A for the members of our War Life Academy and the all access members that are there. But again, we stream it on Facebook, we stream it on YouTube, Instagram. The connection's been wrong, but we are streaming it on Instagram as well. So you can check that out the second Tuesday of every month. It's usually lunchtime. But one of the questions that we got in this past week was from Emma from Illinois, who was asking me about what my recommendation is for a handgun for somebody who is new to guns and has smaller hands. Now, this doesn't just apply to women, it applies to men as well. And it also, the advice that I'm going to give you does not just have to do with small hands. Because yesterday, I was at a local gun store, and probably for the 397th time, I had seen somebody who was new to handguns in there looking for their first handgun. And the advice that they got from across the counter from either the gun store owner or the salesperson that was talking with them. Now, it sounded like this woman, maybe for Christmas, was given the promise of a new handgun or their first handgun. It was definitely her first handgun. I think it was her husband, I'm going to assume, that was there with her, but didn't really have any more information, it seems like, than she had, because they were really taking the direction of the salesperson that they were talking to. And I see this a lot, where when somebody asks, what handgun should I get? That the response is typically whatever that person that's responding is using for their handgun. I see this a lot inside of gun stores, whether it's the clerk or whether it's even somebody that is there shopping also, but seems to have more experience with handguns. They like to just give that's where the machismo comes out, the bravado comes out, and it's like, here's what you should get. If somebody does not ask you questions after you've asked that question, or if you hear somebody asking that question, you need to ask them questions first before any sort of recommendation comes out. I can tell you this from experience because I've had a friend of the family who was shopping around. It was her first handgun also. She had been getting stalked by somebody, she felt like, at her apartment complex. She wanted to get a handgun to be able to defend herself. And she was going out the next day to be able to go and get one. She didn't ask my opinion. She just said that she was getting a handgun. And I asked her, well, what are you going to get? She said, I'm going to get a Glock. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Why are you getting a Glock? And she's like, well, that's been doing some shopping around, and that's what I was told by the people that I was talking to be able to get. It's like, oh, okay. Well, then the questions started, right? Well, what are you getting the gun for? Well, she wanted to get her concealed carry license. Okay. How often do you plan on training with it? Well, I don't know. I'm just going to go ahead and, I want to get a gun. I just want to protect myself. Okay. What caliber, which Glock are you going to get? He said, oh, a 9mm. That's what they said was the most popular one. Okay. My response to her is the same as my response to Emma, which is first to ask those questions. That there is, if you are going to get your first handgun, especially if you have smaller hands or whatever, right, is that you need to answer these questions first. So I'm going to give you what my response was to Emma so that you know how to respond to somebody else. Or if you are looking to get your first handgun, then this will be good criteria for you to use for your first one also. And I think my answer is going to surprise a lot of you, Some of you, it's not going, you're going to disagree with it. And that's perfectly fine. Like I'd love to hear what your questions that you would ask somebody are, or what your criteria are for people in getting their first handgun. So the reason why I asked those questions of my friend, and based upon her responses, is because it all starts with what you want a handgun for. If you are going to get something for home defense, is a handgun even what you should be getting? Can somebody even pull the trigger? How much do they plan on actually training with their weapon? And then what is their physical stature? How able are they going to be able to handle the handgun? So let me tell you why I talked my friend out of getting a Glock. And I carry a Glock. I carry a Glock 26 for everyday carry concealed. I also carry other weapons on me for backup weapons, because I do believe in having a backup handgun when you can use it. And I won't go into the reasons why. I've done other podcast episodes on that. But the immediate reaction to go to whether it's a Glock or whatever it is, like a semi-automatic handgun, you need to understand that a semi-automatic handgun requires training. It requires training. It requires training just to be able to rack the slide, to be able to load the gun, to be able to shoot the gun, to be able to reload the gun, to be able to clear a jam. If you are not dedicated to training with your handgun on a regular basis, especially if you are new to handguns, because it's going to take a while for you to become familiar with that handgun, then you are setting yourself up for a deadly failure if you ever plan on using it for concealed carry. If you don't know how you're going to carry it, like especially for women, if you're just going to carry it inside of a purse because it gives you a sense of confidence or a sense of safety and security because you own a handgun, which, look, that's a lot of people out there. They buy it for the security of even having it. If you don't approach all of those different answers first, then you don't really know what to get. A semi-automatic handgun is not my recommendation for anybody's first handgun. And I say this because most people that do own a handgun and even go to the range and learn how to use it don't practice with it very often. Don't practice with it enough. Go to any local gun range. See how many people are actually, even just go by the parking lot. There's usually not a lot of cars in there. How often do you think people really actually go to the range? Not very often. And so if you're new to handguns, unless you really sink your teeth into it and it becomes a real passion for you and you're going to the range, like, don't even think about getting a semi-automatic handgun. Because at that moment when you actually need to use it, especially if you are using it for concealed carry, you are most likely not going to know what to do with it in the throes of a real attack. You are going to have to get to your gun. You're going to have to fight to your gun. It's most likely going to be an ambush if you're carrying concealed. So you're going to have to fight to it anyway. And when you finally do get it to your hands, is it going to be ready to go? Like, most people that are not familiar with handguns don't feel safe enough to be able to carry around in the chamber, to be able to have a weapon that doesn't have a manual safety. If it does have a manual safety on it, they're most likely not going to think about taking it off safe. So you're going to go to pull the trigger and it's not going to fire. They're going to forget to rack the slide. There's all sorts of things that are going to happen there with a semi-automatic handgun. So I don't recommend a semi-automatic handgun for your first weapon unless you truly, and I don't mean like, yes, I hope to, or I think I will, or whatever. I mean, like, you've got a class scheduled where you're going to become familiar with it, that you are going to go weekly at least with somebody who is trained, that they are a trained instructor that's going to show you how to use it. They're going to really work with you. It's not just about getting a tight shot group or being able to just even shoot it. It's about being able to get to it. It's about knowing what to do with it when you get it. So first, I don't recommend a semi-automatic handgun. Second, especially for somebody who is new to guns and is new to guns maybe for a reason. Like a lot of times people just don't like guns, or don't feel safe with them. I've had this situation even in my own family, especially if you're a smaller stature, right? Stature. Then if you have maybe you are a woman, maybe you are a man who with smaller hands, smaller wrists, or if you are older and have weaker hands, weaker arms, then you're most likely not going to be able to handle maybe even a larger caliber handgun. And by larger caliber, I mean anything that could be a like 9mm, a 380, even a 380 and above, I would say, might be difficult for you to be able to handle the recoil on a handgun. It might scare the hell out of somebody the first time that they try it. And one round is typically not going to be enough to take down an attacker. You're most likely going to need multiple rounds to be able to stop an attack, which means that you need to be able to handle the recoil. If it's a semi-automatic handgun and you have weaker wrists, you might not even be able to chamber another round in the handgun, because if you're limp wristing it, then you're not giving the handgun enough structure to be able to, for that slide to be able to come back all the way and chamber another round to be able to go in there. So you might jam the weapon just by the sheer fact that you're not handling the recoil. When that happens, most people, I mean, even experienced shooters, I've seen them just kind of look quizzingly at the gun, trying to figure out how to clear the jam. I've done that myself. And so it really does, it makes it even harder for somebody. So I do recommend lower caliber handguns for somebody that is going to be new to guns, and you really want to reliably be able to count on it, be able to protect yourself. So let me cut to the chase here and tell you what I recommended for Emma, which I think was a big surprise to a lot of people, which is the same. And I own this gun, and it's the first one that I recommend people get, is the Ruger LCR revolver in 22 caliber. The Ruger LCR 22 caliber. So first of all, it's a revolver. It's super simple. There's no manual safety on it. The safety of the revolver is that it takes it's a harder trigger pull on it. So it's not like a hair trigger that's going to mistakenly go off as soon as you put your finger on the trigger. So its simplicity is right there. You point that thing, you pull the trigger, it's going to go bang. The other thing I like about the Ruger LCR is I tell people to get the one that does not have a hammer on it. So especially for a lot of women that are going to carry it inside of a purse, you can actually carry it in there, have it in your hand as you're going to your car inside of your purse, because you don't have to draw it out. If you have your hand inside of there and it's in your purse and somebody ambushes you and you feel like your life is threatened, you can just pull the trigger on that thing, shoot right through the purse. Don't worry, you can get another purse. And the bad guy isn't going to see it coming. He's not like you have to pull the gun out. It's super simple. But without the hammer on it, you don't have to worry about that hammer going back, snagging on something. And so you get a shrouded hammer. I mean, basically, it doesn't have a hammer on the LCR. There's one that doesn't have a hammer on it. So I recommend that. The 22 caliber is going to carry more rounds in it than a typical 6-round revolver is going to. So there's I believe there's 8 rounds in the LCR. This is also my survival gun. It's one of the things that I tell survivalists, like it's one of the best survival guns out there. I'm a big fan of 22. I've done other podcasts on this as well. But the other thing I like about the 22 is that it's not going to scare the hell out of somebody that is not used to weapons or is afraid to fire them. They don't have that flinch response as much. And it's a great starter weapon, because if somebody does really get into shooting, then they are going to they're going to get more used to firing a firearm that is a 22 caliber, because they're going to enjoy it more. They don't have to be afraid or flinch from the kickback, especially if it's a revolver. Like I've got a 357 revolver. That's my ankle gun. That thing is like a cannon blasting off in your hand. It's the same. I have an LCR, same thing. It's a 357. I've got it in 9mm. I have it in 357. I've got it in 22. But as a 357, that thing is like a cannon going off in your hand. So that's going to scare the hell out of somebody. The 9mm has more kick to it. The 22 doesn't. So it's another great option there. Is it a man stopper of around the 22 caliber? Yes and no. So no, it's not going to have the same effect as a 357 or a 9mm or a 380 or any of the higher calibers there. But bad guys do not want to get shot with anything, because they know that if they get shot, if they get injured, especially if they get shot and they're going to have to go to the hospital unless they've got like their mafia, the veterinarian that takes them into the back room and patches them up like in the movies. They're going to have to go to the hospital if they want to survive. And they know that the hospitals have to call the police anytime that there is a gunshot wound that is brought into the ER, gunshot wound victim. And so they don't want to get shot with anything, because most likely they're going to get arrested. They're going to get caught. So that one single round that you pull off with a 22 could very well be enough for that criminal to hightail it out of there. Shot or not shot, doesn't matter. And that's all you're trying to do with your handgun, is stop the attack. Now, if they do continue their attack, putting multiple rounds into somebody is going to be easier with a 22, especially for somebody who is older, weaker wrists, smaller structure, and new to weapons. You're not going to worry about it jamming. Just pull the trigger. That's it. So I didn't intervene in the gun store. The woman ended up not getting the handgun. So what she ended up with, I don't know. And I didn't feel like it was my place to meet her out in the parking lot and talk to her and her husband and really give them my say on it. Maybe they'll catch a podcast of ours or something. Maybe they'll watch this. Maybe we'll get lucky there. But I just think that it's this one size fits all sort of like get a Glock 9mm is really, really bad advice. So if you are new to handguns, or if you know somebody that's interested in getting a handgun for personal defense, use these questions to their advantage. Help them to be better protected, to be their own warrior, to be their own first responder, by asking them the right questions and giving them the right advice with what it takes. Now, I would love to hear from you of what you think the best handgun would be for somebody. How would you answer Emma's question? What's the best handgun for somebody that is new to handguns and is a smaller stature person? I'd love to hear what you have to say. So please go ahead and leave a comment on our blog where you might catch our podcast over at warriorlife.com, or you can go to warriorlifepodcast.com. That'll take you over to the podcast section of our website. If you are watching this for our stream, go ahead and leave a comment under this video, wherever you're watching it, on Facebook, on the YouTubes, on Instagram, wherever it might be. I'd love to hear what your advice is and what has been your experience in the past. When have you had somebody that's come to you for this advice? What have you given them for their advice? Love to hear from you. Please go ahead and leave a comment. Short one this week. We'll be coming back next week with a much longer stream. We've got something special planned here for coming up into the new year. So I really appreciate everybody's support for 2022. If you are watching right now, please go ahead and subscribe to our podcast over at warriorlifepodcast.com, where you'll find all the different options there. We're on a bunch of different podcast channels over there. If you're watching us on the YouTubes, go ahead and subscribe to our video channel, where you can go ahead and hit the little bell there. You get a notification every time that we come on here, both live and if we release a new video out to our list there. And if you're one of the over 1 million followers that we have on Facebook now, please go ahead and make sure that you check us out there. We are putting in a lot more. We're getting a lot more feedback from people there. We're asking for more of your input, and we're going to be featuring some of your comments also on the podcast as well. So go ahead and check us out there. All right, that wraps it up for this week. So until the next broadcast, is Jeff Anderson saying